Here in Northeast Wisconsin, we are the sturgeon capital of the world. That's a title that we've earned. Nowhere will you find such a unique cultural connection to the sturgeon than right here in Wisconsin. And if you don't believe me, just come back in a few weeks to see thousands of people behind me on Lake Winnebago. This is absolutely vital to our way of life, but it's not just cultural or economic connection that have made our community the sturgeon capital of the world. We also have the world's most meticulous management plan. It's one that combines public and private efforts, from biologists at the DNR to fishermen and local fishing clubs up and down Lake Winnebago and a variety of other stakeholders. This is exactly how it should be done. A common sense partnership between a variety of different stakeholders. But if lake sturgeon were to be listed under the Endangered Species Act, our successful management, our highly successful management of the sturgeon population, and our time-honored tradition of sturgeon spearing would all come under threat. We can't let that happen. We are here today to make sure that that does not happen. Today, we're going to take another step to ensure that Northeast Wisconsin can remain a global leader in lake sturgeon management by introducing the Sturgeon Protected and Exempt from Absurd Regulations Act. I'm very proud of this name because it is an acronym that spells out SPEAR, if you didn't put that together. That is the Sturgeon Protected and Exempt from Absurd Regulations Act. And the concept of the bill is simple. It would prohibit the lake sturgeon from being listed in the ESA in only Wisconsin and ensure that the management of our sturgeon stays where it belongs, in the hands of Wisconsinites. Because while we often think about the cultural significance of sturgeon spearing, which actually goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, it's easy to forget how this time-honored tradition is critical to the way the DNR manages the sturgeon population. We have mandatory DNR-operated registration stations that are established to collect detailed data on the length, the weight, the sex, the tag status of each harvested fish, which ensures strict seasonal harvest caps are followed. So then they take that data alongside detailed spawning reports conducted by the DNR with community collaboration across the state, and this then allows the DNR to maintain an accurate spawn rate account of population levels to maintain the survivability of the species. That's how we maintain the species going forward. And furthermore, the fees that collected by the DNR for spearing licenses are then used specifically to conduct the DNR sturgeon management and advance their overall conservation efforts. Again, it has been immensely successful from a conservation perspective, and it's incredibly important from an economic and a cultural perspective. So this act would build off a bipartisan letter that we sent, Glenn Grothman and I sent to the Fish and Wildlife Service earlier this year. And again, this is just about common sense. We're trying to get ahead of what could be a bad decision for Wisconsin and actually counterproductive to the goal of protecting lake sturgeon. So with that, I will stop talking and I will turn the microphone over and the podium over to my colleague whose district we're not quite in, though he keeps creeping up closer to the 8th district. He's trying to take my land from me. Glenn Grothman. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it.
Well, like Mike said, it's kind of frustrating that we have to be here because it's just an example of Washington thinking that the local people here in Wisconsin apparently don't know what they're doing. And the DNR, all the sportsmen's groups, have done such a tremendous job of making sure we have a good, strong sturgeon population year-round. The sturgeon come in on the Wolf River, but also in the Fox River. In a couple of weeks, they'll be going down the Fox River in Princeton. And for those of you who are not into spearing but want to just see something absolutely tremendous, I suggest you show up on Main Street in Princeton at that time, because you will see just an endless stream. Just look in the water, it's kind of amazing. An endless stream of sturgeon flowing east, and it's something that shouldn't be missed. But in any event, I'm glad that Mike drafted this bill. It's important for the U.S. Congress to weigh in strongly and let the national folks know what a good job we're doing here, how long that we've kept the sturgeon population nice and high, the fact that it will continue to stay high. I mean, some years, this, as I understand, it shuts down within two days. They get all the sturgeon right away. Other years, goes, almost 2 weeks. So it depends from year to year, which shows what a meticulous job they're doing at the DNR and overall in managing our sturgeon population. As I understand, there's going to be a meeting here later tonight. It's good to have a lot of people here so that the national people realize that they've touched a nerve here, and they realize how many people on their own are paying attention to maintaining a good, strong sturgeon population in the state of Wisconsin. But I'd like to thank you all for being here, and I think it's important that a lot of local spears are here. So again, the people out of Washington don't just think this is something they can get away with, and we're a bunch of bozos who don't know we have sturgeon around here. Thank you.
Now, your local state representative, a gentleman I've known before he was a fancy state representative, a true family man, someone who cares deeply about this community, State Representative Ty Bodden. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I represent the 59th Assembly District, which is Stockbridge, all the way down to Hartford. Represent 5 different counties. Fortunate that this is only a 2-minute drive to get here today. So, shortly after learning about the lawsuit, where a judge ordered a decision regarding the listing of lake sturgeon, me and my office took immediate action. In early October, I circulated a letter to my legislative colleagues seeking signatures for a letter to the Department of Interior Secretary Deb Haaland and Director of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Martha Williams. The letter requested that Wisconsin, particularly Lake Winnebago region, be exempt from any endangered species list ruling. Thank you to my colleagues who signed on to that letter, particularly as well Representative Michael Schra from on the other side of the lake. Thankful that he is here today as well. We sent that letter out to the Department of Interior on October 17th, 2023. While this is a federal issue, we are committed to exhausting all options to fight this at the state level. Late last week, Senator Dewey Strobel, Representative Nate Gustafson, and I circulated a resolution regarding lake sturgeon and sturgeon spearing. If passed, it would state that the Wisconsin State Legislature does not support the listing of lake sturgeon as endangered on the endangered species list. The resolution also requests that the Department of Natural Resources continues to collaborate with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to implement proactive measures for the lake sturgeon. It also urges the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to work diligently to maintain the sturgeon status outside of the endangered species list. The Wisconsin DNR has done a fantastic job managing the population here. Additionally, it also declares that the second Saturday in February this year as State Sturgeon Spearing Day in Wisconsin, just wanting to embed it even further into our state sturgeon spearing roots. I'm thankful for the Department of Natural Resources and their conservation efforts to our sturgeon, as well as our fishing clubs. Many of the representatives are here today. Sturgeon for Tomorrow as well. It has always been a strong collaborative effort and always will be. And I want to thank our congressional leaders, Congressman Gallagher and Congressman Grothman, for stepping up and addressing this at the federal level. This must be a collaborative effort through and through, and today's and tonight's events will be a great opportunity to inform and unite people of all parties behind the cause to save sturgeon spearing traditions in Wisconsin. Thank you.
Do we have a representative from Sturgeon for Tomorrow? Jim Pat, are you here? Jim? Jim, you want to say something? I'm putting you on the spot.
You are.
Yeah, I get put on the spot all day, every day, so I have no sympathy for you. Okay.
Give me a history of Sturgeon for Tomorrow, so I guess I'll do that.
Sure, do you want to come up here real quick? And yeah.
Not what I expected.
They won't bite, I swear. Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Well, Sturgeon for Tomorrow was formed in 1977 with the mission statement, the propagation of lake sturgeon. The sturgeon population in Lake Winnebago was in decline, and we thought at an all-time low. Sturgeon for Tomorrow wanted to somehow protect and propagate the lake sturgeon to bring its population back to historic levels. Since that time, Sturgeon for Tomorrow has added 4 more chapters that represent over 2,000 sturgeon enthusiasts. Sturgeon for Tomorrow's goal was to raise lake sturgeon in a hatchery setting and release them back into the Lake Winnebago system. We also knew we had to work through the DNR to do so. A meeting was set up with the fisheries biologist Dan Foltz, and after listening to our request, he informed Sturgeon for Tomorrow they had tried more than once, but sturgeon propagation in a hatchery was not possible. In Madison, DNR managers were wondering if the intention was just to be able to spear more fish. Raising sturgeon had never been done in North America, and no one here knew how to raise sturgeon. To keep the DNR standards using sound science in managing their resources, Sturgeon for Tomorrow was told that if they were serious about the project, they needed to draw up a scientific research proposal, complete with literature review and experimental design, that would have to pass several review boards before being implemented. No one at Sturgeon for Tomorrow was a scientist, and were disappointed in the position of the DNR. However, we were persistent, and through a chance article in National Geographic magazine, we read that an American researcher, Dr. Bill Ballard, not the one from the Titanic, had traveled from Dartmouth College, had traveled to the Soviet Union for the last 15 years to study sturgeon in the Caspian Sea. We contacted Dartmouth and got in touch with Dr. Ballard, who, when described with the situation, said, "My God, man, where are you calling from?" And when told, exclaimed, "You have sturgeon in Wisconsin? You mean I've been going to Russia when I could have studied sturgeon in Wisconsin?" The conversation continued, and an excited Ballard agreed to come to Wisconsin to meet with Sturgeon for Tomorrow and the DNR. All it took to get Ballard here was a round-trip airfare paid for by Sturgeon for Tomorrow. In February 1978, he sat down with Sturgeon for Tomorrow and the DNR to discuss the ins and outs of sturgeon rearing he observed in the Soviet Union. He then wrote a research proposal for Sturgeon for Tomorrow, which was presented to and accepted by the DNR. The experiment to raise sturgeon in a hatchery was on. The first year's attempt at a private hatchery near New London was not successful. However, detailed notes were taken, noting water temperature and appearance of eggs. The decision was made to try again the next year. Dr. Ballard came back and partnered with the DNR. The hatching process was moved to the Wild Rose Fish Hatchery. Changes were made and success. 80% of the eggs hatched. The first time lake sturgeon were raised in a hatchery in North America. Jim Addis, the man overseeing the experiment, may have been one of the happiest people to hear the results. He wrote to the department's supervisor of fish production. Accordingly, this information should be adequately shared in professional circles and publicized to the extent practical. Publishing the results couldn't come soon enough. Word had gotten out, and fisheries biologists from around the country were already clamoring for more information about the successful experiments. Sturgeon for Tomorrow was pleased as well. Soon after, a first check from Sturgeon for Tomorrow was sent to support sturgeon propagation research. To Addis warmly replied, "We appreciate the generous donation and Sturgeon for Tomorrow's involvement in promoting it." In 3 years, the relationship between the state DNR and Sturgeon for Tomorrow went from skeptical and contentious to an alliance working toward a common goal. So through Sturgeon for Tomorrow's nonstop efforts and goodwill, the DNR realized the organization could be a positive for them and the lake sturgeon. Our relationship with the DNR allows us to work together on many projects, included, but not limited to, DNR biological research of sturgeon, along with helping fund trips to symposiums, scientific gatherings on sturgeon, the rehabilitation of sturgeon spawning sites with fresh rock called riprap, the Sturgeon Guard program, protecting spawning sturgeon at their most vulnerable time from a poaching culture on the Wolf River. Working with and funding Professor Fred Binkowski of the UW-Milwaukee School of Freshwater Science Lab's long-term research project on the Fox River. Funding for the Wild Rose Hatchery to raise 10,000 fingerling sturgeon per year for distribution around Wisconsin and in states such as Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, and Missouri. Missouri took a quart of eggs for several years, raised them, stocked their fingerlings in the Missouri River, and they have expanded rapidly and are now also found in the North Platte River. Because of sturgeon guard, creation of new spawning sites, and refreshing of older silted spawning sites, no sturgeon have been stocked in the Lake Winnebago system. This shows that if given a chance, how resilient this ancient fish can be. We have partnered with Shadows on the Wolf to improve public viewing of spawning sturgeon at Bamboo Bend in the village of Shiocton, along with expanding parking there and shared costs to re-rock Bamboo Bend and 1,300 feet of the Sturgeon Trail in New London. We also worked with Walleyes for Tomorrow to fix the Eureka Dam so walleye and sturgeon fry could survive the trap caused by a continuous rotating current on the downstream side of the dam that trapped most sturgeon and walleye fry. Since inception, Sturgeon for Tomorrow has raised over $1,300,000 to fund these and other related projects. Sturgeon for Tomorrow is recognized around the world because of our support for the DNR in sturgeon research. In 2001, we sponsored the 4th International Symposium on Sturgeon in Oshkosh, with representation from many U.S. states, China, Afghanistan, Russia, Italy, France, and roughly 35 other countries. Our sturgeon biologists have told us that they are envied by these countries as they would love to have a supporting organization like Sturgeon for Tomorrow to work with. Through the combined effort of the DNR and Sturgeon for Tomorrow, the sturgeon population has recovered dramatically and may be close to the carrying capacity of the Lake Winnebago system. There were 3 things that we believe made this happen. The Sturgeon Guard program that protected the spawning sturgeon and changed the poaching culture on the Wolf River. The research by DNR fisheries biologists that greatly increased the knowledge and understanding of sturgeon. And 3, the laws passed with Spearer and Sturgeon for Tomorrow support that prevent overharvest, along with greatly increased fines for taking sturgeon illegally. However, our work is not done. Sturgeon for Tomorrow will continue working to keep this ancient fish swimming in our waters.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Do we have a Sturgeon Guard representative from the Sturgeon Guard here?
Yep.
Want to add anything?
Sure.
Okay, great. Please, come on up. Yeah.
I can explain the garden. First of all, I want to thank you gentlemen for being
Thank you,
here.
appreciate it.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Don Milke. I've lived just north of here all my life. Been sturgeon fishing, and back then you had to be 14. Now it's 12 because I'm old. But anyway, I served on a sturgeon advisory board for approximately 25 years, and I never had the opportunity to work with the Sturgeon Guard because all those years I was a dairy farmer for 47 years, and I still do cash grain. So that certainly ties in with the spring, my spring work. And when I heard that the Guard was going to be stopped, I was quite perturbed about it because I saw how important it was. When I was a kid, my God, if somebody got a 100-pound sturgeon, the phones would ring off the wall because that's where they were back then, and you went to see it. Now, we all know how many 100-pound fish are out there. And I am totally convinced that it's because of the lack and the cease of the violations up in the upriver system. And I'm not saying it was a situation of a lot of negative people. It's a situation where these fish are just so ungodly docile. And you talk to the people that do it, or where we're doing it, and it's simply the answer that comes out of their mouth immediately is because I could. Okay, the way the DNR did the Guard previously, up to 4 years ago, was if you had the appetite to serve on the Guard, you contacted the DNR, signed up for a slot, and then you would meet when your time came up at the sturgeon camp up in Shiocton. You would be served either a breakfast in the morning or a dinner in the afternoon, and that was your reward for driving up there, and serving on the Guard. That had to be stopped. I know a lot of the DNR personnel, for good reasons, not bad, but and they explained to me what actually took place up there, and the main thing that had to be stopped was the waste of food. This lady that was preparing all this food up there, Ben Tremble came to my house when I announced that I was interested in getting the Guard reestablished, and he just was hoping I wouldn't have that idea, because he used to spend a half a day of his time as a game warden while the fish were spawning, distributing extra food to food pantries, and that's not what he was hired for. So I came up with this idea, let's get rid of that program. Let's get rid of that program completely, and I worked as, I called all 5 of the chapter presidents of Sturgeon for Tomorrow, and I told them my idea on how we could do it. I asked for a budget. They met, they approved my ideas. Ben Tremble, who is the head DNR agent from the Greenbay area, after sitting down and explaining what I wanted to do, he thought it could work. So what we're doing now is we're asking for volunteers. I'm taking a list, and they're contacting me via email. Paul Smith. Paul, where are you?
Hey,
This gentleman was a godsend
I'm not coming up to talk.
for me, because
We'll see.
he heard I had this idea. He interviewed me over the phone and did an article in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He sold it to Greenbay, he sold it to Oshkosh, he sold it to Fond du Lac, Appleton, whatever, and the emails started coming in. Okay, so I knew we had to have a budget, and I went to the Sturgeon for Tomorrow chapters. I asked for $5,000 for a budget for the first year. That was granted. And what we decided to do, and I'm very lucky, I've got an outdoorsman that is a very good friend, and we've been friends since we were 14 years old. And he used to tell me about all the illegal shenanigans that went on up at Shiocton, and he wanted to get involved in the Guard. And then, because of Sturgeon for Tomorrow chapters, I met a wonderful young couple that actually live in Scandinavia, Jen and Josh Ritz. And Jen is a gadget person, where I am not. So she was able to fill in where needed in the technical situations. Okay, last year was probably the worst year that we could have restarted the Guard. And like I said, my goal last year was to go in front of the news media and say the Guard is back. Look over your shoulder. If you think you're doing if you're thinking of doing anything wrong, there are going to be people watching you, hopefully. And so I took this list. The Sturgeon started running. We concentrated on the 3 big areas that Jim talked about, as far as Bamboo Bend, Shawano Dam, and the County Road X. We did, as the season progressed, we also had people at Pfeiffer Park. Glenn, you had talked about Princeton area. We have a quadrant leader up there. That's what I'm trying to do, is make the people that know the area in charge of the area. So we have a quadrant guy up there that knows that area like the back of his hand, that volunteered to do this. Very lucky to meet him. Okay, so the people come, they serve, and I explained right out to them, you're not going to get food, you're not going to get this, but we tied it with Quick Trip. And after the people serve, I hand wrote a letter, and not to each one, but I copied it, and they were given a $40 gift card for each time that they served on the Guard. No wasted food whatsoever. That's what I wanted to accomplish. Support the locals. There's Quick Trips all over, thank God, and people could get gas, they could get food, they could get whatever they wanted for their time served. So then, we had a situation that was really heartwarming to me, because a number of the people said, we're not doing this for the card. And you talk about passion on this sport. They said, you just keep them cards. We don't want cards. Well, I talked over with the 2 other guys that are heading this up with me, and that was not our call. That was not our call. There's no way we were going to do that. So what we put in the letter was, if you wish to return a card to Sturgeon for Tomorrow so that they could use it at their banquet for additional fundraising, I gave them Jim's address and they could send it back, okay? We sent out 57 cards to the people, the 32 people that helped serve, and more people served more than once, obviously, because it was the first year getting back going. People came from, Bloomer was the farthest, Madison, the people from NEW Zoo in Green Bay, they had a delegation come and serve. It was just overwhelming, the people that came and how far they were willing to travel. And many had done it previous, but many, this was the first time. But of the 57 cards that were sent out, Jim just shared with me that 13 were sent back to Sturgeon for Tomorrow, that these people didn't want nothing to do with it. So my initial request was for $5,000. We ended up getting $2,280 worth of cards, so we were less than 50% of budget. And of those cards, 13 were also sent back to Jim. The most heartwarming thing I had besides these people's generosity was Zach, the game warden from the Shiocton area. Because I didn't know how, nobody knows. I mean, anybody out here can tell me how many fish were saved because of the guard 20 years ago? Hell no, excuse me. No, we can't, because we don't know. We don't know, nobody knows. And I didn't know if this was gonna make a difference until Zach, the warden up there, pulled me aside and he said, you know, Don, he said, you're here. You're at Bamboo Bend, you're at Shawano Dam, you're in the public spotlight, you're here. And we can be out there. And I thought that was exactly what I wanted to hear. So, if anybody wants to serve the guard this year, we're always looking, but just contact me. I know there's people here that served on the guard. And I can't, this was a personal dream of mine. I was frustrated when the guard was stopped. No one came up to volunteer, and finally I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, well, you dumbass, why can't you do it? And I talked it over with my partner, and here I am. So it's been very rewarding, and I hope we're making a difference. And I hope, thank you for your work. Okay, thank you.
I now have underpaid staffers looking for the 13 cards that were returned to supplement their income. Anyone from Stockbridge Harbor want to say a few words? No? Going once, going twice? Oh, right here. Perfect. How are you? Good.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Stockbridge, the sturgeon center of the world, on the quiet side of Lake Winnebago. That is, until sturgeon spearing. If the lake sturgeon are added to the Endangered Species Act, it would be disastrous to the Stockbridge Harbor Fishing Club, the Stockbridge community, as well as other fishing clubs and communities surrounding Lake Winnebago. The Stockbridge Harbor Fishing Club has been in existence for 52 years. Our club is mainly active in their winter months, before and during the sturgeon spearing season. Club members have participated in the Sturgeon Guard and support local conservation efforts. If the sturgeon spearing season would be eliminated, our club would lose its purpose and quite possibly cease to exist. During late January and February, Stockbridge bustles with activity. People have a spring in their step for the anticipation of the upcoming spearing season. Many are out assessing the ice, stopping at the bait shops, consulting fishing clubs, and stopping in at the local establishments to get the latest water clarity or ice report. During the season, spectators gather at the registration stations to capture a glimpse of the prehistoric fish. It's safe to say sturgeon spearing has a huge economic impact to the businesses and communities surrounding Lake Winnebago. Many families in the Stockbridge area have deep sturgeon spearing traditions that have been passed down through the generations. Some families can even tell stories how the Stockbridge Indians taught their ancestors how to sturgeon spear right off the shores of Lake Winnebago. There are even sturgeon effigy mounds that are shaped like sturgeon located not too far from Stockbridge as well. Family members who don't live close come home for spearing, to not only spear it but to reconnect with family and friends. There have also been many well-known spear makers and decoy carvers that have come from the Stockbridge area. If you get a chance, stop in at the Stockbridge branch of the State Bank of Chilton during spearing to see their vast collection of decoys from local carvers. In closing, the Stockbridge Harbor Fishing Club and the Stockbridge community strongly oppose the Lake Winnebago sturgeon population being added to the Endangered Species Act. We appreciate any assistance that legislators can do so that we can continue to have the opportunity to pass down these sturgeon spearing traditions and skills to future generations. Thank you.
And then finally, anyone from the Friendship Fishing Club want to say a few words? How are you? Best beard of the day so far. Yeah, good.
Appreciate it.
My name's Mitchell White. I'm with Friendship Fishing Club. First and foremost, I want to start out and to say thank you to all of our elected officials that have been working to protect the sturgeon spearing tradition. I want to especially thank Representatives Bodden and Schra, as well as Congressman Gallagher and Grothman, because their efforts have been instrumental in getting us together here today. Regarding the letter that we as a group of clubs have been working to send to Director Williams and Secretary Haaland, with this letter, what we wanted to do is step back and look at this topic from the standpoint of someone who may not be familiar with all the functions that fishing clubs perform in Wisconsin, because our situation really is unique. We wanted to call attention to the activities which transcend the obvious, which is making the lake safer to access. While improving access and ensuring the safest possible navigation is most all of our primary goals, we also engage in community benefits, charitable giving, scholarship awards, and the list goes on. The reason we mention all of these functions is because a lot of the funding that makes that work possible comes either directly or indirectly from the sturgeon spearing season. The absence of this season would also result in the absence of the lion's share of all of this funding. We must also remember that a whole host of other issues would come along with the discontinuation of spearing. Funding for groups like Sturgeon for Tomorrow, Shadows on the Wolf, and others is derived from the spearing season as well. So these groups, and in turn the fish, would also suffer. Additionally, without this management of the system, it would be very hard to predict just how negatively the population would be impacted, as fish that would normally be harvested would remain in the system consuming resources, but a negative impact is almost certain. You've heard more in-depth explanations of all these other complications from the other representatives here. So like I said initially, our goal is to call attention to the aspects centering around our clubs that other people may not be familiar with, and in terms of what fishing clubs we do and where we get our funding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before we open it up for questions, just want to thank the proprietors of Harbor Bar, Shane and Cherry, for your hospitality. This is a great place. Again, I encourage everyone to buy a bunch of beers after this. Am I allowed to do that on TV? I think so. It's Wisconsin, right? Be a crime not to. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, questions?
Mike, where does this issue stand? Obviously, you're going to introduce this bill, and where's it going to go from here? And then the deadline that, you know, that the Fish and Wildlife is up against, I believe it's the end of June.
Yeah.
So talk about, can you update us on that?
Yeah, so I know that the Fish and Wildlife Service is aware of our concerns, owing to the letter that was previously sent, and the introduction of this bill will amplify those concerns. We've engaged with them multiple times. So right now, as I understand the process, they could issue a prospective rule prior to the June 30 legal deadline, after which point there would be 60 days for review and comment of the rule, and then there would be a finalization of the rule. And hopefully it would come back saying not warranted, so that means the species is not listed. That'd be the best scenario for our purposes. It could come back as endangered. That means that they've determined it's in danger of becoming extinct, and all the prohibitions kick in. So that would effectively ban sturgeon spearing unless we were able to get a waiver. Or they could come back saying it's threatened, which means that the Fish and Wildlife Service has determined it's in need of protection but not endangered. And then there's a fourth category, warranted but precluded, which means that the species might warrant protections under the ESA, but Fish and Wildlife is not yet prepared to make a determination. So in that case, that last case, they would become a candidate species, and their status would be reviewed every year. So hopefully it just comes back not warranted, and that we can put this issue behind us. We're going to continue to send the message loud and clear that this would be a bad decision. And I think the fact that we have, not only federal and state concerns, but also bipartisan concerns. It's not just Republicans that are concerned about this. And also, I don't want to speak for the DNR. We have very productive conversations with the DNR. You've heard multiple representatives from the Sturgeon Guard and others say that they've had a productive relationship with the DNR on these issues. So my hope is that the Secretary and the Fish and Wildlife Service will take our concerns into account. We can avoid this thing entirely, or avoid having to go down the waiver path.
So is this bill just to send them a message, or do you believe that you can get this bill taken up and passed prior to them making a decision?
Well, I'd certainly love if we could take it up and pass it. I've given up trying to handicap the probability of getting anything passed in the modern Congress. It's very divided right now, but this is a common sense measure, which I think wouldn't encounter really any opposition from sensible-minded legislators. Now you may laugh at the term sensible-minded legislators in Congress, but we're going to try to pass it.
And so just to follow up,
Yeah.
how soon do you expect it could have a hearing or be taken up, at least at the committee level?
I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, we're working with the committees of jurisdiction. We haven't gotten a firm commitment one way or the other, but sooner rather than later would be great.
First of all, I want to commend you for making it a bipartisan bill, because I think that was the biggest step to getting it done. Would this bill be put out on its own, or would this bill be attached, as many of them are?
Well, right now it's introduced on its own, and then if you wanted to pass it on its own after it went through the committee process, you could do it under suspension in Congress, which means if you pass it by a higher vote threshold, in that case you just have to convince the speaker to put it on the floor, higher votes. Otherwise, it would have to go through a different committee, a different process on the House floor, and it could be theoretically attached to something else, provided it weren't kicked off a bigger bill because it wasn't germane.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But you look for either option when you're trying to get something
Mike,
passed.
just to piggyback off his question, have any
Yeah.
other Congress people in Wisconsin signed off? Have any Democratic Congress people?
What's our current count? Do we know, or it's early? I mean, we're in. Yeah. If Glenn's not on it, he's going to sign it right now in front of you. Yeah.
Because you said it's a bipartisan.
Yeah. Well, our letter was bipartisan. The effort is bipartisan. I don't yet know if our Democrat signatories have signed on to the bill. I'm sure they will. I don't anticipate. So we're just going to keep growing the list as it goes forward.
As we speak, we have both senators and
Yeah.
6 of the 8 congressmen.
There we go. So we've got 2 holdouts.
Who are the 2 holdouts?
Yeah. Is it Pocan
Maybe
and
this way, yeah, Pocan and Moore.
more?
More.
We'll get them. We'll get them, Glenn. Yeah.
So, if the bill passes, and gets signed into law by the president and stuff, and the Fish and Wildlife deems sturgeon endangered, the bill would essentially allow Wisconsin and the DNR to continue kind of taking care of the population the way we have. I guess, could you just kind of, is that accurate to just kind of describe it that way?
Yeah, I mean, it would basically exempt sturgeon from the process and allow us to continue our management. And again, the intent of the ESA was to allow for that collaboration between federal and state and local authorities in order to protect species. So my reading of the current state of play and of the law and of the Constitution is that in that scenario in which we passed the bill and they still made an adverse ruling or a not warranted or an endangered ruling, that we would win out. I mean, theoretically, or historically, the legislature is predominant in our system of government. It's only in the last few decades that we've moved to this model where the executive branch does everything through executive fiat. And I think a lot of people are reacting to the chaos that creates. It's just not the way our country is supposed to run. Things are supposed to be done via the legislature or via the states predominantly, not via unelected bureaucrats.
And then there was a 2023 report from the DNR on the lake sturgeon population, and they kind of described the population, or the Winnebago system sturgeon population. They described it as like stable and sustainable, I want to say. I guess, are there other pockets around the country where like sturgeon populations are dwindling? Are there other pockets of sturgeon populations around the country?
I don't know in other pockets around the country. Everything south of Chilton, in my parochial view, is just strategic depth. So I pay attention only to northeast Wisconsin, and occasionally to what the Chinese Communist Party is trying to do to America. But no, I've just focused on what's happening here in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Along that line, I was wondering, where did this originate? I mean, who brought it up? I mean, do we have failing population somewhere else, or is this more of a...
The Fish and Wildlife going down this road?
Yeah.
That's a good question. When did the process start? I mean, the Fish and Wildlife Service, I don't know. I think they've overstepped completely in this case. Because as far as I can tell, there was no red flag that went up that suggested, oh my gosh, the problem is severe enough that they would have to get involved. But we started to hear about it from concerned constituents. People like you who every year take part in this tradition, and that's why we stepped into action. But as for when the Fish and Wildlife Service first started, I don't know the answer to that question. Sir?
Mike, Andy Orm from Sturgeon for Tomorrow, main chapter. The SPAC started back in 2018. The Center for Biological University.
There we go.
Started with this, put the sturgeon on the endangered species list, and just that little bit of information.
Sure.
Information from the Department of Natural Resources has been great, sent down to the University of Texas for compiling, and this is where we're at right now.
Thank you for that. Obviously, we have tribes in our district for whom the sturgeon are very special, culturally, historically. I've had great conversations with the Menominee Nation, and so that's a healthy relationship, and I think they would want the same thing we want, which is this balance of effective population management that still allows for the sport annually. Sir.
Well, my question was, has the Department of Fish and Wildlife been informed that this excellent management that we have of the sturgeon population is totally dependent on the funds from sturgeon spearing?
Yeah, and that was a part of our initial letter. It's been part of the conversations I've had with them, so they should be aware of it. Whether they take those concerns into account remains to be seen as we go through the rulemaking process. But again, I think sending this signal loudly, clearly, that this would be bad for Wisconsin and also counterproductive. Yeah, by the way, Glenn, you can answer the hard questions. Come on. Well, I think we'll force them to take account of those concerns. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I wonder if it wouldn't be a bad idea even to invite some of these folks out here.
Sure.
Because I think
a great idea.
The variety of groups we have here, or earnest they are, how obviously caring they are, I would bet when you deal with different endangered species is somewhat unique. And the fact that the groups here have increased the population over the last 40 years, I think is very impressive. I haven't dealt with a lot of federal agencies, but one of the things that struck me when I have dealt with them is they don't get out of Washington.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So they can think. I'm thinking of issues entirely apart from this, but it kind of amazes me the lack of on-site knowledge that some of these federal bureaucrats have. And if we invited them out here to see you folks, if they quite frankly, if they were here today, I think maybe it would, influence their decisions.
Good call. We should do that. Any others? Going once? Back there, yeah. Oh, sorry. What? I don't know. Both of you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, if you were asking for RSVPs for today's meeting, do you have any kind of preliminary number?
Yeah. How many people are coming in? Over 200, which tells you how important this issue is.
It'll be more.
It'll be more than that. And that is tonight, the Stockbridge High School gym at 7 p.m. in Stockbridge, if you want to come join us.
Mike, one other question.
Yeah.
Have you been in contact, I know my service in Wisconsin is what we're looking at, but have you been in contact with, let's say, Michigan or Minnesota? Have any contact with the other states?
I've talked with my colleagues in Michigan, not Minnesota. We all work very well together on issues related to the Great Lakes. There's a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative caucus that traditionally is also bipartisan. We're able to come together and just for the good of the Midwest and the Great Lakes system, work on legislative initiatives together. So I've engaged that mechanism to voice my concerns. It seems Well, they were receptive to it, but I think it's fair to say here in Wisconsin we're kind of leading the charge on this right now, though they've wanted to be helpful. So, good. Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.